Exes are dead. They don't exist anymore. If they exist, then get with them. Otherwise, they don't exist. Yo, what's up, Bulldogs? All right, I got another question here from a coaching client of mine. If you don't know, I do a little bit of relationship coaching. It's not really officially out there as something that I advertise, but if you want some help with that, you can email me at john@bulldogmindset.com and see if there's a slot for you. But I'm going to kind of paraphrase the email here. Again, I want to keep things anonymous, but this is from a guy who says that he's been in a relationship for a pretty good length of time. She's gorgeous, has a lot of attention on social media, and talks about a few guys she dated in the past. And the other night she talked about a few guys that still message her and how she responded by telling them she was in a relationship. One she hasn't though, and that left me a bit uneasy. He says, the other morning when my ex texts me, I said, why not respond in a fun manner with a flirty sexual undertone? Then told her I was seeing someone and not to contact me again. Well, okay, last night, the girlfriend is on the phone to change channels on TV and sees the flirty sexual undertone exchange and gets really upset. She didn't see the stop contacting me part. I apologize and tell her it was a mistake and I'll block her and never respond again, but I feel guilty and I think I ruined my trust with her. How do I handle this? Do girls see those things differently than guys? So a lot to unpack here, but let's start with a foundation here. Exes, they're dead. Aside from if you have a child and you have some kind of co-parenting situation, you have to deal with that. Exes are dead. They don't exist anymore. If they exist, then get with them. Otherwise, they don't exist, right? So that means no texting, no messaging, no looking them up on Facebook or any of that kind of stuff. That's a baseline. And as a man, you need to set this rule in the relationship. There's 6 rules of relationship that I have. All right, I've done a video on this, a whole podcast episode on this on my podcast with my wife, Better Than Perfect Podcast. Go check that out. Subscribe if you would. And you can check out the Clips channel. We have a Clips channel as well. We actually need some subscribers on there. If you just want to help me out and subscribe on the Clips channel, if you look up Better Than Perfect Clips, I would appreciate that because we need 1,000 for monetization. On there we've got like 500. We're getting a lot of views on there, but just not subscribers. So anyway, basically one of the 6 rules of the relationship is that no communication with exes. So that's the first thing. No ex communication is something that you got to talk about, and that should be a conversation that you're having and saying, okay, look, here's how we really need to handle these things. And this is where I would even say just no friends of the opposite sex either. So exes and friends. So if someone texts you, how do we respond? What is the protocol here? It's to tell them I'm in a relationship or to completely ignore it. But usually in most cases, what makes sense is to say something polite and say, hey, appreciate you reaching out. However, I am in a relationship. My blah, blah, blah is wonderful and I'm not going to be available to speak. All the information, all of the text should be shared. If someone texts you of the opposite sex, that information should be shared unless it's a business type of thing, right? So a good example is just the other day, I've got some really tight friends that we just went to their wedding in Mexico. And normally I don't even follow women on Facebook at all. The only exception is if this woman is a tight friend of my wife and we have a very couples type of friendship with them, and it would be kind of rude to not follow. So in that case, I will. And the woman had messaged me, innocent message, nothing, and just about the wedding and something I had posted on Instagram, totally mundane, totally fine, right? And I responded back and I just screenshot it and just sent it to Nicole, right? Because transparency is super, super key. So what I would say in this situation is that you've got to have that talk, right? And just make it very, very clear on all these things. And yeah, okay, you made a mistake here. And this is a good launching point to have this conversation and say, look, I screwed up here, right? Because I should have just said, I'm in a relationship and I need to cut this communication. This communication should have been cut. So it's really not appropriate for you to contact me. It's disrespectful to my girlfriend. That's what should have happened. Obviously, it didn't happen. But now you can have that conversation and say, this is where I messed up and this is why this is really important to me and this is what I'd like us to do. Now, let's talk about a little bit just breaking down a few points of this. When you have a gorgeous girlfriend and she attracts a lot of attention on social media, again, this comes to one of the rules of the relationship, which is that she should not be publicly on social media. Unless it's for a business, no public account. When you go exclusive, you go private. That's how it goes. This especially applies for women because men don't usually get hit on social media. If you don't have access to her Instagram messages, she doesn't have access to yours and your text messages, the phone, and all this stuff, again, that's another rule of the relationship, then you've got a problem. You want to create as much transparency as possible so there's no room for secrecy. Now, there's an issue here about a guy that most of them she's messaged and says she's in a relationship, but one that she hasn't. That has to to be handled right away. That communication has to stop. Again, if you have this conversation, you gotta tell him you're in a relationship and not to contact you. But again, the whole thing with you making the mistake and responding with a flirty sexual undertone, it almost is like, okay, well, she did this, so I'm gonna do that. And you admit it and say, look, this is just not appropriate for either of us to do in a relationship. Then you reestablish that trust. Right? And transparency. Like, look, I want you to have access to my phone, to my messages. If any woman messages me, I'm going to screenshot it, I'm going to send it to you, or I'm going to just show you on my phone. This is why these rules of relationship are important, because that transparency creates trust. When you're hiding things, even if they're not hiding something wrong, but when you're not transparent, it creates distrust. So that's the best way to create that trust and to restore that. And, do girls see things differently than guys in this situation? Typically, yes. Girls generally will think that it's okay to communicate with guys, friends that are guys. They'll think that it's okay to have friends as exes and maybe even sleep over their house because they're like family and all of these things. And so that generally tends to be the case as I'm coaching guys. I find this, but it's not okay. You got to make it very clear. And sometimes, like I've said in other videos, you can kind of flip the script and help her to see, well, what would happen if it were turned around and it was the other way around? How would you feel about this? It's just a great way to appeal to people when they're resistant to some of these things, right? I've dealt with this with the friend thing where girls are like, oh, well, why are you so threatened by my guy friends? Blah, 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 blah. We're just going to lunch or something like that. And just like a brother to me. And then you can kind of say, well, okay, what if I had this bombshell girl that was my friend and we're just going to go out to lunch? I'm not going to have my location on. How do you feel about that? You feel comfortable about that? You see what I'm saying? It's like sometimes you got to just kind of flip the script and do that. But the big thing is setting these rules to a relationship and making them two-way and being transparent. And when you're leading in that way, you're preventing these problems from ever occurring. See, that's my whole philosophy on this is like, we want to prevent these things from ever occurring. And when you do it that way, then things will work out better. So if you have a question for me, you can email me at john@bulldogmindset.com. If you haven't joined the Bulldog Mindset membership, you are missing out because I have a ton of content on women, psychology, relationships, dating, all of the stuff that you need in order to get into a relationship if you aren't in one, or to make that relationship so much better. Also check out the Better Than Perfect podcast. I will see you tomorrow.